All right. We're gonna give people a little bit of time to come back in. I don't know what happened, but it said we had people and then we didn't, and now it's filling back up. So I'll give a few seconds and then we'll get started.
Okay.
All right. I don't see any more names filing in, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am HB. I'm a third year at Virtual Health in OBGYN. I'm so happy to have you guys here with us to ask us all your questions. As you know, over the last couple of years, OBGYN applications have changed a little bit. So we have a spectrum of people on the panel with us tonight. We have an intern, Dr. Crenshaw. We also have a newly graduated attending, Dr. Anderson, and then someone near and dear to me, my program director, Dr. Daniels. Thank you all for joining. We also run the gamut of backgrounds and how we got to this place. We won't bore you all with our stories. We really want this to be interactive and you guys to ask questions. We know you guys have a lot of questions about the new changes with the application. But we're going to start with the one that I've gotten the most about in my DMs, which is signals. So Dr. Anderson and I didn't have that privilege of signaling. I know Dr. Crenshaw had the opportunity to do that, and Dr. Daniels, obviously, as a program director, is on the receiving end of those. So I'll start with Dr. Daniels and let her give her thoughts about how you should use your signals, and then we'll go to Dr. Crenshaw and let her tell you guys how she kind of thought about her signals and what that resulted for her. Dr. Daniels, over to you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Daniels. I'm an OBGYN and I am the program director at Virtua, which is HB is one of my residents. I'm just going to preface by saying I'm going to apologize in advance. I have some unattended children downstairs and they are going to interrupt at some point, and I apologize. But that's the whole work-life integration that we just do sometimes. Signaling. So signaling came out of the Right Residency program initiative from CREOG. What it is basically each candidate's going to get 18 signal, 3 gold and 15 silver. Second grade math is hard. To send each program. You know, the last year was the second year we did it, I think. Yeah, maybe. It was really unclear the first year that we used it. We weren't really sure how the students were being counseled on it. We weren't really sure how program doctors were going to use it. As we just finished our second year using it, I think that you need to be very mindful of using your signals too. From a program doctor standpoint, I don't really care if you're sending me a gold or a silver, as long as you are signaling me, I'm going to be looking at your application. A lot of program directors are now looking at signaling only if they are like a larger program that gets a lot of applications. And then there are other programs who look at signaling first and then look at the others afterwards. We are a new-ish program, so I do look at both because I don't want to miss out on anyone really good just because they don't know about me. So I do look at both people who signal, those who don't signal. Even people who have done a sub-I or people who've done a home institution, let's say that you are a Drexel medical student. We're only pulling that out of the hat just because we have Drexel students. You may have done a sub-I with me. You're not going to get an interview with me just because you did sub-I. If you didn't signal me, you may not get an interview. So if you were interested in a program, then signal them. The whole reasoning behind signaling is, one, to help out you guys from a financial standpoint. You're not applying to 100 programs. You'll save a lot of money. But more importantly, because it's all about us, the program directors, we were getting thousands of applications and it was impossible to do a holistic review on them. So at least with signaling, you're kind of honing down, okay, what are my top 18 places I want to go to? Let them do a deep dive into my application and see if they're interested in me. So it's just kind of narrowing down who is applying to what program and what programs are looking at the candidates.
Dr. Crenshaw, how did you use your signals last year?
Hi, everybody. My name is Amber Crenshaw. I'm one of the interns at LSU in Baton Rouge. So with the signaling process, kind of like Dr. Daniel said, last year was like the second year that they were using it. So it was still a little bit of confusion about how we should best use them. So there were a lot of meetings from ACOG and our program directors, especially in our region, and everybody kind of was like, we don't know. We were still trying to figure it out. And I felt like that was very frustrating as an applicant because it was like we had 18 signals, which was, I mean, it was significantly more than some of the other specialties, but it was just frustrating because you have all these signals, but you don't really know what to do with them. So my advice came from one of my mentors at another program. And he told me to think about the places that I wanted to go in a systematic way. So kind of like I was making a rank list, kind of like a preliminary rank list, if you will, like from the data that I had about the programs and the places that I was interested in. Of course, those would be like my top 3 programs, and I would use my gold signals for those. And then my silver signals were kind of like programs where I was genuinely interested in them, kind of a mix. It was some of them I was genuinely interested in them, and I knew that unless I signaled them, kind of like Dr. Daniels mentioned, if I signaled them, I wouldn't get an interview. And then programs where I knew I wanted to go there, I was in the region, and that I kind of felt like I would blend into the program well. So it was just like the silvers were a little iffy, but the golds for sure, I knew these are my top 3 programs and these are the people I want to give goals to.
And APCO, which is the I don't know, the organization that's over all of this, the education part of OBGYN as a specialty. I'm part of the committee that came out with this program, and the things that Dr. Daniels and Dr. Crenshaw have shared are they're factual. But they did a entire webinar about how to signal, etc. And you can catch that on their website. So if you need more details, but I think the most important thing is because so many people got mixed information in the last year about what to do. There is data. I don't know if it's been published, but so you didn't hear it from me necessarily, but there is data that a lot of the people who they talked to at the end of the last cycle, the only interviews they got were from programs they signaled. So these 18 signals are not just Chuck E. Cheese tokens, like take them serious and use them wisely. Let's see, we have a question in the chat. Dr. Daniels, this one is for you. Do programs prefer just signals to indicate interest, or are letters of interest also still welcomed?
So actually, if you read, so I was gonna say, and my dog is barking, I apologize. There's an app, it's called RRR OBGYN. And I highly recommend that you guys take the time to do that. They have different tabs on there. One is for the applicant, one's for the program, but you can fill out like a questionnaire to kind of help match you to see like what program you align with the best to help you kind of guide how to use your signals. That's the first thing. Second thing, if you read about the right residency, right program structure, they actually discourage letters of interest and in communication between programs and applicants. Last year, I got over 800 applicants to our program. If every single person had sent me a letter, it is, and I'm bad at email. Brittany, HP will tell you I'm bad at email to begin with and text messages to begin with because I have a lot going on in my house. So to answer or even read that many emails, it's very overwhelming from a program director standpoint. So letters of interest, not so much. And they actually encourage, no communication or very little communication. Now, if you are an applicant untraditional, you're really interested in a program, okay, fine, choose 1 or 2 programs to send a letter to, but that's not necessarily going to factor into whether or not I offer you a interview. It may make me do a second glance at your application, but it's unlikely that if your application isn't qualified for my program, it's unlikely that I'm going to boost you up to an interview just based on a letter of interest. Signaling is taking the place of letter of interest, and so we're really pushing for people to use the signaling.
All right, so the next question or questions, we'll just kind of put them all together, is about how do you present an application that will really showcase who you are. So obviously one of the concerns that people always ask about are red flags or pink flags. Pink flags being lower step scores, red flags being, failed courses, et cetera, et cetera. I will say, as someone who had a red flag, a huge red flag, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you've heard all about my red flag, but I actually got dismissed from medical school. So that is on my application. And I still managed to match into OBGYN, but it wasn't because I did not work really hard to get there. I did a prelim year. So for people who have a less than stellar application, you definitely want to consider the possibility that you have to do a prelim year. I did mine in general surgery at the University of Wisconsin. And I think that helped me a lot. The other thing is because med school didn't matter anymore. They could see I was going to be a good resident and I would function and do well as a resident. So, if you find yourself in the position of needing to do a SOAP spot, you should still take that serious about like where you match into. You want to go to a program that is going to be rigorous and is going to prepare you to be a good intern. Dr. Daniels rose her hand.
If there's one thing that you take away from this webinar advice that I give, if you do not match an OBGYN, try to get into a prelim OBGYN. There's only like 10 in the country. Second option for you is to do either surgery, prelim, or categorical. How CMS funding works, if you choose to go inside family medicine, which is a 3-year program, then once you match into a residency program, CMS is funded by Medicare. They will only pay for the number of years that you first match into. So for example, let's say HB didn't match into her first time into her OBGYN application, she went into the SOAP, and she decides, well, I want to do something easy. So I'm going to do family medicine for a year, then reapply to OB. A lot of programs may not look at you because they're only going to get funding from CMS for you for 2 years. Medicine is a business. So if you don't have guaranteed funding for 4 years, a lot of programs may not look at you. So just be very mindful if you don't match. Try to choose surgery, prelim year, or categorical year, because surgery is a 5-year program. You'll still get 4 years funded, and a lot of programs will not exclude you from that. So just keep that in mind.
And then if you can't change what you can't change, right? So if your step 2 score is not, a 260 or whatever, there's nothing you can do about that. But you need to make sure that who you are is reflected in your personal statement and your research and your extracurricular activities. Dr. Daniels, there was a question in my DMs that I promised to ask. How do you write a personal statement that stands out?
Do not use ChatGPT, whatever that robot AI thing is. Let me tell you why. Last year it was more prominent. I can tell you who wrote their essay with ChatGPT. Not at first, but when you're reading through 800 essays and people are starting to have the same themes about their first visit to a GYN doctor, with the crinkling of the paper when they sit on the table, or that middle of the night phone call from a friend who's having a pregnancy scare and how they had to coach him through it. There are a lot of themes that these AIs will use over and over again. When you get so many people who are writing the same essays, and we as program doctors, I was at a conference in February, we were all cracking up laughing because we all had the same themes. A lot of people had the same themes in their essays. Crinkling the paper for the first OBGYN visit, mother walking through, helping their mother through a loss or through fibroids. So there's definitely themes the ChatGPT will put out there a lot. And we can tell after we've read, a couple hundred essays who has authentic essay or who has used ChatGPT. I'm actually going to allow the younger people in the group to talk about how they wrote their essays, and I can give some just brief advices of do's and don'ts, if that's okay, because I haven't written a essay in something years. So
Dr. Anderson, Dr. Crenshaw.
Hi, again, my name's Tori Anderson. I actually thought, I don't know, I kind of had a theme when I wrote my personal statement long time ago. It wasn't that long, but it was based off of my med school personal statement because, a lot of times people don't know what they want to do in medicine before they start medical school. I was blessed enough to be able to know, I knew from the very beginning I wanted to do OB-GYN. And so I had this kind of continuing theme from my med school my med school personal statement that included why I wanted to do it because I had that background of always wanting to do this. This was a theme that I had for all of my application process. And then when I got to my residency applications, I included that kind of background story into my personal statement. And then one of the things that I've seen just in the match process of reading other people's personal statements that my program is really probably too much. They involve the residents in this process. And so we read also a lot of the personal statements, a lot of the applications we review ourselves with the program director and the chair of the department and kind of the leadership of our department. They send them out to a core group of residents that are reviewing all of the applications with them. One of the themes that I saw that I felt allowed people to be chosen or at least allowed their application to stick out a little bit better was having some sort of hardship that they like a genuine hardship, not one that, like you said, from ChatGPT that you made up from something, like having a genuine hardship in life that you persevered or overcame because the residency is difficult. And so you have these moments where even if it's not necessarily a medically related story, we have the personal statements that I remember that stood out are people who talk about, losing a family member and having to be the only person in their family to take care of their siblings and things like that and having to be responsible and those kinds of instances. If you have those stories, why they may not be medically related, but they do show a character. And that's the thing that people are looking for, I feel like, a lot of the times.
Dr. Crenshaw.
I think for me, I kind of took that approach, but I also wanted to make it something that was really personal for me. I didn't really want to talk a lot about hardship because I feel like in every interview I did, I was always having to talk about trauma, growing up this way, growing up in this environment. And it was just after a while, I kind of got tired of having to put that in essay format. And I was talking to my advisor, my OB-GYN advisor for residency, and she was asking me what my hobbies were and things that I enjoyed outside of medicine. And I was telling her that I was a dancer. I danced my entire life. And I would say my most impactful dance experience was in college. I danced on a dance team in college, and I was also a pre-med major, which was very, very challenging. And when I told her that, she immediately was like, talk about that in your residency application. And I was kind of confused because I'm like, nobody will care about that. Not really. But she was like, no, that's important because it's one, who you are, and two, it shows that you have commitment to things that you start. You're able to be efficient, you're a planner. I had a leadership role on the team. So, that shows responsibility, time management skills, all the things that you're looking for pretty much in residence. And being able to put that experience into word format, it took a little bit of creativity, but I think after several rough drafts and kind of taking it to different mentors and getting different people to look at it, having multiple people tell me what they would change, what they wouldn't change, that was a little stressful, I would say, because you have to kind of figure out what critiques can you change, what can you change in your essay based off of the critiques without making it something that's not authentic. So that was a little challenge too. But I think just finding that one thing that makes you different. And funny enough, every single interview that I had, they always asked about my dance experience. I did not have a single interview where nobody asked, oh, can you tell me about the dance team? Can you tell me about this experience? And it worked out.
To your point about drafts, something I did that I think was really helpful. I did, well, it wasn't traumatic, but I wrote about Hurricane Harvey because I'm an IMG and I was on the last flight into Houston before Harvey hit. So I wrote about Hurricane Harvey, but one of the things I did was I had people who were not in medicine read my essay, and people who knew of me but didn't necessarily know me read my essay, because what you think you're conveying may not be true. And people who know you really well will interpret the silences in the ways that they know you. So I called it my pocket committee, but have a group of people who can review your essay, and you get insight from all kinds of people as opposed to just people just like you in medicine and OB, because we sometimes kind of read into things that may not be there, and people who don't know you may not read that way. So that's another way you can make sure like your essay is conveying the message you want it to convey, is to have a bunch of different people read it. You don't have to take all their advice. Like Dr. Crenshaw said, it can be overwhelming, but you want to have more than just like your trusted friends read your essay. There's a lot of questions, and I said we were going to answer them live, so let me go back
So
to them.
can I'm kind of scrolling the questions. I may be able to answer a lot of these in one thing. A lot of these questions are looking at like blemishes, or I don't want to say red flags, but blemishes on your application, whether it's a low step 2 score or da, 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 da. I think that if you have something that is not or what you deem as perfect on your application, it is okay. CREOG, which is, so APCO is for students, I think of CREOG for residency, but all of it is OB/GYN education. We are all looking at a holistic application. What does that mean? So that means that we are reading the application from front to back. And so if you have other things to kind of help you shine on your application, you shouldn't stress about it too much. If you have like a blemish or something you think is not perfect on your application, please address it in your essay. If you have a valid, good reason for it, that is going to fly better than hoping that we don't catch it on our review, because that makes you think you're sneaky. Going back to the essays, do not go over one page. I stopped reading at one page, and it's not just to be rude. It's just, it's so many applications. Again, think about who your audience is. We're getting over 500 plus applications. So no more than one page, please. Give us some insight into yourself. Tell me, if someone mentioned there about being a dancer, religious based. Great. What did you learn from it? How did it make you a better person? What were some leadership skills that you got to learn from that? What did you learn from it? How did it make you a better person? Give us some insight into some of the things that you guys have done. Let us know who you are through your essay. What do you have to offer the field of OB/GYN? What made you fall in love with it? And don't talk about delivering your first baby. We've all done that. It's cliche now. Like, give me something to let me know who you are as a person. If you're passionate about dancing, why are you passionate about dancing? Be careful being too creative. I had one person I read an essay, and it was a recipe for cooking, and it made it like she was trying to cook up the perfect OB/GYN. It was weird, didn't land well. Be careful with that, because you can turn off a lot of people. Remember that be careful sharing too much personal stories. It can turn people off. There was one girl who I thought had a beautiful essay about, her decision to move forward with an abortion, but my faculty who wound up interviewing her happened to be extremely Catholic. And that didn't hit well with them. And so you need to be very mindful when you're choosing these personal stories that you're writing to a broad audience. That may, be from New York City, Manhattan, or it may be from Mitchell, Indiana. So you have to make sure you're really making sure that you are keeping it kind of broad, but still kind of showing who you are as a person. I think that answered a couple of the questions. Yes, HB? I'll go back to being quiet now.
No.
I was just gonna say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Nope, go.
No, I was just gonna say that in that regard, when you have those extremes of people, if you know your know who you're applying to and the community that you're applying to, because I had personal statements and I had 3 drafts of a personal statement. One went to a certain group of programs. Another one went to another. They were all the same similar themes. You talked about like a cooking theme. Mine had a cooking theme. It clearly landed well because everyone asked me about it, and it was not making the perfect OB-GYN. It was just about more so along the lines of like having to follow the rules, but then also having the freedom to be creative. And those are the things that you can do. And that's why I like cooking. And that's why I also like OB-GYN. And that was kind of the most that I used from that. But at the same time, there were parts of my personal statement that I catered to certain programs based off of location in general. And that's something really to keep in mind, is like, know your target audience, basically.
Just for the
Okay.
record, that's not the essay. I'm like, the essay I'm talking about, the cooking thing was like 1 cup love, 2 cups this. Yeah, it was strange. And it was also like over 20 years ago. So it was just didn't land right. So yeah.
I definitely agree with catering, like having different personal statements for different reasons, especially like if you have a range of programs that you're applying to, big academic programs versus smaller community-based programs, because sometimes they have different values, and that doesn't mean that you don't fall into both categories. It just means that you might have to tailor the way that you express your values in a program to kind of really help them see how you would fit into their program, if that makes sense. And kind of like what Dr. Anderson said about cooking, like for me, dancing, it was just like with choreography, I talked about how surgery is kind of like dance in a sense, because everybody's hands are moving every which way. You have to know what your partner is going to do at the next time, anticipating steps, being able to readjust, things like that. So, I mean, you can take something that's personal to you and that's creative, but also tailor it to if the president was to read it, or if the program director, or even just a random resident, or in a whole nother specialty, if anybody could read it, they could get your point. Like your point would come across to anybody who reads your personal statement, and they will understand why you're trying to be in this specialty at this program.
So with residency CAS, you only get 1 personal statement. So yes, so you have to be mindful of where you're applying. Someone asked about like reproductive advocacy. If that's something that's important to you, I'm gonna take a step back, because one of the things that we always worry about is, what if they don't like this about me? What if they don't like that about me? XYZ. If it is important to you and they don't like it, you probably don't want to be there. Now, obviously, reproductive rights is a big topic in our field right now. I'm gonna take a step to something that's a little less fiery and talk about hair. I clearly have red locks. You know how many people said maybe you want to do something different with your locks? No, thank you. If they don't like something that is core to who you are, then you probably don't want to be at that program, because you're not going to change who you are. And if you do try to change who you are, your mental health may suffer. So for things that are important to you, I'm not saying you have to, talk about anything in detail, but just remember that things that are important to you will always be important to you. And sometimes that means you might not go to a program that you really, really like because they don't like that thing about you. So keep that in mind. Everybody said the same thing at the same time. So I'm just going to get rid of all of these questions so we can see what's left. Dr. Anderson, do you want to talk about applying as an IMG? That question came up a little earlier, and how we are counseled to apply to every program known to man.
I I don't know. I feel like I'm out of the loop now, because I didn't even know that you couldn't apply with more than 1 personal statement up until 2 seconds ago when I read that question. I was like, oh, well, that was bad advice. I think that, especially as an IMG, you have to do your research. Obviously, you have to look at the programs, because this is not just your future, but it's also like your financial literacy. Like, you have to be able to afford to apply to all these places. So you don't want to go bankrupt trying to get into all of these places. While they do recommend that you apply more broadly and that you try and do a wide variety of places, I personally did not want to live on the West Coast. All of my family's on the East Coast. I grew up on the East Coast. There was nothing about anything on the West Coast that appealed to me. I even rotated at a program at a hospital in California, and I didn't even apply there because I was like, I don't want to go to California. I think it's important to know the programs that you're applying to and see their history. Clearly, they have all of their residents on their web pages these days. You know where everyone's gone, and use that to your benefit. Like, if this program takes a lot of IMGs, then I'm gonna apply to that program because they clearly have found a sweet spot in that field, and they're looking for people like that. So I wouldn't. You could apply broadly. Like, I'm still okay with you doing that if that's something that you want to do, but just know that, like, your chances of matching in a program, if you're applying to, I don't know, Yale, and you look at their resident list and they have 15 people from Yale, then you're probably not going to Yale for you. And like, why waste your money in doing that? But if I see a program that takes a lot of IMGs, then of course I'm going to apply to that program because they are already looking for it. And people have their own biases when it comes to those things, and that can change within a program. You have some programs that take a lot of people from one particular school versus another, but then doesn't mean that you can't. If I kind of classify it as a broad umbrella of IMGs, because I used to think that, if they took a Ross or they took a St. George or they took somebody else, they're not going to take me from the opposite school. But that's not necessarily the case, especially if those IMGs do well, which is also why it's important as an IMG when you go to these programs to represent yourself and to do a good job, because you don't know who else is coming behind you that may need that door in, that help. So I think it's important to apply broadly. I think it's important to apply places where other IMGs have been successful, because that just at least saves you money on the the long run.
And there is a spot of diminishing return. Oftentimes, I think as IMGs, we feel like it's a numbers game, and my chances increase if I apply to more places, but there is a spot of diminishing return, both for US students and IMG students. So apply to the places that make sense. If you know you don't want to go to that place, or you know you don't have the credentials for that place, don't apply just to say you applied to 120 programs. It's just not worth the money, the energy, or the effort. I'm 3 cycles from this process now. My first cycle, I did apply to a lot of places because people scared me into doing that. And the second cycle, I think I applied to 40 places. And I only did 40 because I like round numbers. So the last couple were just whatever. And it was fine. Any tips for DO students?
I actually had every year in my program, we've had someone that was a DO. So I don't think that I'm sure Dr. Daniels can speak to it more, but from my program standpoint, there was no, it was an even playing field. As long as you scored well on your exams, just like everyone else did, then you were equally considered as a candidate.
Same. My only tip for DO is just to apply, but make sure you're applying to, programs that are, I would say, DO friendly. Not every program has the philosophy that I have, that they want to have a well-rounded, diverse program. There are some people in which pedigree is extremely important. Some of your older academic institutions still kind of don't appreciate what the DOs can bring to your program and to the table. And so just being mindful of that. If you see a program that has a DO there, they're probably going to be DO friendly. I think the old school mentality is kind of going away between MD and DO. And as long as you are a good applicant, where most of us are going to be looking at you. So I don't think you need to do anything that's different.
Just make sure if you didn't take step 2 that they accept level 2. Because if they don't, then you're wasting your time.
Technically, all programs are supposed to be taking either COMLEX or USMLE. It shouldn't make a difference. In reality, we can't always say that we're doing what we're told to do, but in theory, it shouldn't make a difference. Just want to say, but you know, people do what they gonna do.
And they love to put it on their website too. Which, to that point, I dropped it in the Q&A, and I don't know if participants can see, so I'm gonna drop it in the chat. This is the link to the Residency, Program Ready Day One site, where it has all of the different links to all the different apps you can use to help you figure out what programs are a good fit for you. There's an alignment index on there. I will tell you that based on this alignment index, I did not align well with my program. They said, that's your fault, Dr. Daniels. You didn't put the right information. That's what they told me.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. We were like a 47% match or something. And I was like, well, that's a lie because I matched there. So 100% check. It also talks about like the slow and how you should approach that. And then there's also some information about signaling. So all of that can be found on that website that I just dropped in the chat, which will be important to you. There's a question about program selection for applicants doing a prelim gen surg year, gen surg year. And it says, I'm having a hard time finding info on programs to consider applicants with prior GME experience. I don't actually, as someone who was in your shoes, I don't actually think there's data like that out there. And I personally didn't even look for it. I just applied like I was a fourth year all over again. Obviously, use your gen surg experience in your application. Make sure you mention that you are doing a prelim gen surg year. And why that has made you a better applicant. But otherwise, I would approach this as if I was, well, I did approach it as if I was just one of the other applicants. Dr. Daniels, how badly does it hurt your chances if you don't have a step 2 score by September 25th?
I saw that. It depends on the program. I will speak from my perspective and a couple of my colleagues that I talk to a lot. It does hurt you just a little bit, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get interviews. My advice would be if you don't have a step 2 score, and the reason why it's not because we really care about the score. Let's just say, for example, that you're a procrastinator and you delay, and then you take it in the spring right before you're about to graduate and you fail, then we can't take you as a candidate. And that's just too risky for PDs. And so we want to know that you've taken step 2 and that you've passed it, so that we know we can actually take you as a resident applicant. So if you have it come in after September 25th, which is the deadline, then that's when it's okay to email the program. Hey, Dr. D, I took step 2 a little bit late, couldn't get a date. Here's my score. You know, or send us a message through. I don't know if you can send messages through CAS like you could ARAS, but you try to reach out to the program if you have it before. I think we're sent out invites to interviews October 24th. Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere on my calendar, but sometime late October.
So this question was basically, with the holistic review of applicants, if someone's a strong USIMG applicant, would you recommend they apply to a couple of programs who have not taken a USIMG, or do you suggest sticking to only IMG friendly programs? I got interviews at places that had never taken an IMG before. So I would say,
especially, oh, sorry. I was gonna say, especially if you are a strong candidate, like you have the good scores, you have the experience and all of that stuff, go right ahead. I had a girl that I desperately tried to get to our program and she was an IMG. She had a 260 on her step scores. And I was just like, I want you to come to our program. She rotated with us. She was really good. And my program director was like, she's not going to come to us. And I was like, but please, she's so good. We ranked her high. She went to California and went to like this academic program in California because they took a shot and took their first IMG, which was her. And I'm like, good for you. Like, I'm so happy for her. But at the same time, like, I was like, I wanted you to come with us. So if you have the scores and you have the pedigree to do so, by all means, please do.
And you never know why an IMG is not at a program. It may not be that they didn't rank them, etc. Like Tori just said, they could match somewhere else. We have a choice too. So, you know, a couple of programs outside the box or reach or whatever they want to call them is not going to hurt you. It's when, you know, all 50 of your programs are reach programs, then maybe we need to have a conversation. All right. There's a question about sub-Is, Dr. Daniels. Does it matter how many sub-Is you complete, and does it look bad to have them in other specialties?
No, I think that having a well-rounded resident is what you want. So I don't think you can have too many sub-Is, especially if you have a sub-I in surgery with a really great recommendation letter to talk about your surgical skills, or one in internal medicine that talks about how well your critical thinking and, level of inquiry is. I think those are all very helpful things. I don't think that sub-Is can hurt you unless you just really just underperformed on it.
And then there's a question that says, what makes an applicant stand out after an interview? I'm going to say the time to stand out is during your interview. Once the interview is over, that's it. It's over. I know a lot of programs, the day, like after interview day ends for you, they have a conversation and they rank the people of the day. And then at the end of the season, they go back and kind of rank everybody based on how they felt during each interview day. So when your interview day is over, you kind of just go to the side until the end of the season. So there's really not much you can do after the interview. As you heard, signals are replacing letters of interest. So, and if programs say don't communicate with them, do not communicate with them. We did have a lot of program directors speak about how they explicitly said at every point of the interview, please do not send thank you emails, follow up this, please do not do that, please do not do that. And people that they had ranked highly did that. And that shows that you can't follow instructions, and that's not good. So honor the wishes of the program. If they leave it vague, then just don't. If they say, please send me an email, then email them. Dr. Daniels, you raised your hand.
Well, I think segue, let's talk a little bit about interview season. I think very different when I was interviewing as ours was in person. Now it's all virtual. I'm assuming Dr. Crenshaw went through virtual. Dr. Anderson, I'm not sure if you went through virtual interviewing, but I would love.
No, I was in person.
Okay. So
The last in person.
2019. Dr. Hazard, Bigby, I would love, I think that from a resident perspective, you guys want to give some advice on what not to do on interview day. So I know that HBU said it on some of our debriefing sessions, and there's a lot of things that we can tell you're doing during your interview, or how to have a good interview sessions that you do shine. I think would be really helpful for you guys to get that advice. And then we can give you a program director's perspective afterwards.
Sure. So I can tell you from the resident perspective, most programs will have like a resident component where you hang out with the residents for some time, whether that's the night before or the day of. With our program, you hang out with us a lot of time. Oh man, we've seen some crazy stuff. And you think people aren't paying attention because you're like a small box on the screen, but you don't know the background of the people sitting on the other side of that screen. I have a background in behavioral health, and I pick up on so many things on people's behaviors. So it's okay to have a snack, right? Discreetly have your snack. Please do not sit in the middle of the interview or the waiting room for your interview with your snack. Like, you're making a lot of noise, you're crunching, your mouth is open. That is poor manners. Don't do that. Allow other people the opportunity to talk. You want to be present in the interview, but you don't want to overpower the interview. So if there's 20 people and you don't know anything about anybody else in the room, you're probably talking too much or you're not listening. And then when you ask questions, don't ask questions that you can find on the website. Everybody's not into social media. I understand that. But if the information is out there, then you probably want to find it, because it is very frustrating when people say, oh, do you have a 24-hour call shift? And I know for a fact, Dr. Daniels talks about it on her Disney PowerPoint. So pay attention to the information that's shared, because when you constantly ask us the questions that have already been answered, that don't look good. And then from the applicant perspective, I remember thinking, oh man, I hope I don't match with that person. Like these people that you're interviewing with, they're gonna be your co-residents. Be kind. Just be kind. Don't be rude. And they also get frustrated if you're over talking them or not allowing them the opportunity to chime in. So just remember that the person you're sitting in this interview with very well could end up being your co-resident at a different program. You don't know. Don't create bad blood before you even get started.
I 100% agree with all of those statements. As someone, like at my program, we have like a pre-interview night. The night before the interview, you meet with just the residents, and it's really truly just the residents. Like the program director's not involved at all. But there's a ton of insight that comes from that. And I know that they're like, I won't say that we use that night to judge you. That's not at all what happens. It's supposed to be a very casual, informative kind of session that you have to get your jitters out before you have your interview with the residents. And at my program, the residents that do it are usually pretty nice and it's pretty fun. Like it's very casual. But if you do something that's obviously, or say something that's obviously like a red flag, don't think that we don't go back the next morning and tell our program director, like, you would not believe what this person did last night on the phone. Like, it's stuff like that that will carry over. If it's a good thing, great. If it's a bad thing, I had one person that like she collected Legos and she had like tons of Legos around her room. For me, I thought it was really cool. And I brought it up the next day at the interview session. I was like, this is the girl and that's how this is the girl with all the Legos. Like, that was so cool. And my program director loved it. Like, everyone loved it, but it was like, that's fine. And then there were other people that were, doing very weird things the night before, and then it carried over to the next day. And it was just very awkward. You also have to understand that the residents that are involved in this, I did it every year somehow, even though I didn't want to do it. I was involved in this process every single year. And those information sessions, the waiting rooms that you're sitting in before you interview and you're talking to the residents and they're asking questions, especially if the resident that is in the waiting room was the one that was there last night or the night before, do not ask the same questions that you asked the night before, because now I'm just annoyed. Like, why did I spend my whole night, my 1 hour or 2 hours off the night before telling you about all of these things that, you want to ask about the program, just for you to come back the next day and ask me the same question again? I'm like, oh, wow. Like, what was last night for? So like, pay attention. You're asking questions. Don't ask questions just to ask questions. Like, genuinely ask the questions that you want to know the answers to. We say the same thing to everybody every single time. So like, after a while, it gets kind of annoying to hear the same question. But like, if I hear the same question from the same person, I'm gonna be like, oh, you don't listen. Like, so keep those things in mind. Like, try and use those sessions to your advantage. Be appropriately dressed. Don't do any bad mannerisms, like HB said. Like, try and keep everything professional, because even though it's virtual, it's still a professional interview. And like I said, when I interviewed, it was in person. We had to come fully dressed in professional attire and not like attire from the waist up. Like, you had to have your mannerisms out. You had to make sure that you were doing everything appropriately. And that, I feel like, was key, because you're able to see the characteristics of people that you're working with in person. You don't always get that same aspect when you're doing it virtually. So we're literally trying to grasp at straws at whatever we can find about whatever we can see from what you're presenting. So make sure that you're putting your best foot forward.
Dr. Crenshaw?
So I think I have a different experience since I was the one who had a completely virtual interview experience. Plus, I haven't been on the side of interviewing students yet. So I think from my perspective, of course, the social was a really big part of interview season for me. Just even as a student, you can look at the residents and kind of see, do they get along with each other? Do they talk to each other? Because I mean, I had some interviews where it was like crickets, and the residents are talking to each other and the applicants are talking to each other because we're nervous and it was just awkward. But then you would have some where it just felt like you knew these people your entire life and it's like, okay, I can fit in here. They have similar interests to me. So that was an interesting experience, but I think it was still helpful even though it was virtual. It's like you have to make it meaningful for you. And I think that can just apply in general to the entire interview season. Even though it's virtual, you have to make it meaningful for you because at the end of the day, this is where you will be spending the next nice little chunk of your career. So you want it to be worth your time and you want it to be worth everybody else's time. And something that I found helpful was the programs that would send me interviews. I would like at the beginning of the week, I would look at each program that I was interviewing at, and I would just do like a quick run through their website one good time, kind of see things that I really, really enjoy about this program, but also kind of look at things that I would have genuine questions about, maybe the location or something about their program that I kind of want to know a little bit more about that they didn't talk about on the website. And sometimes they address it during the welcome session, so I don't really have to ask it during the interview, but sometimes you just kind of have to ask a little bit more to get the exact question that you want. And of course, be kind because you never know when you'll come across these people again. Even if you don't come across them in actual residency training, you might meet them doing a consult or I don't know, in a meeting like this on a panel. So just be kind to people, be human, um, try not to be try not to be distasteful, be mindful of the things that you say. Even though sometimes these are informal environments, people are always listening. And I'm learning that now as a resident. It's like you'll hear people say things like, why would you say that? So being mindful of things like that. And for me, I personally got dressed from head to toe every interview. Even though it was virtual, I just felt like it made a difference putting on my full outfit because I'm remembering this is an interview. I feel like it adds a little bit more to the formalness and it makes me not think, oh, I'm at home, I'm doing an interview, it's fine, it's virtual. No, full outfit. The only thing I didn't wear was shoes, but um top, dress, suit jacket, like that was my full get up. And I would definitely recommend practicing. If you have someone that you trust, my school, we had a career advisor, and I would just go to him and he would give me mock interview questions. We would go through them. He would give me pointers about things I could work on, even like my lighting, being mindful of little habits that I might have, pin clicking or not making eye contact, just little things like that that you probably might not pay attention to because it is a virtual interview.
I wholeheartedly agree with Amber talking about getting dressed because the last thing you want is to forget that you're not dressed and stand up and then who knows what you have on the bottom. So I also got completely dressed.
I would say,
What-
just to add on to all that, don't be on your phones. I don't know how, but the residents can tell. They were like, "Oh, Dr. Jones, she was on her phone the whole entire time in the chat room. She didn't interact. Her answers are rehearsed." Like the residents know, and the residents, at least in our program and other programs across the country too, either participate in the debriefing session or have some meeting with the program doctor to review candidates and to have input into their rank list. So participate in their virtual events with the residents, be interactive and show your best, your foot forward on interview day, but not to the point that you're overbearing. It's hard. It is really hard, but it's saving you guys a ton of money. So yeah.
One last question, and then we're gonna wrap up. And this one is for Dr. Daniels because you're the one who rates applications the most. Are letters from residents worth anything, especially in situations where we rarely work with attendings and they refuse to write a letter?
So I was dodging that question only because I don't have a good answer. And I've been sitting here thinking about it. I was like, one, would I know that a letter is from a resident or not? Here's what I say about letters recommendations. Have a slow. You guys should all know what a slow is. Have a slow. Not even looking at people who don't have slow anymore. If you don't have at least one slow in your application, I'm not going to look at you. And a lot of program directors are doing that. When you're choosing, so it's funny. One time I had a letter of recommendation from somebody who I know this person. And so her letter said a lot. It was one sentence that said, this student rotated here. And then she signed it. And that says something. One, it says, okay, probably not a student. And this person is a more direct person, but not a student I'd even want to even consider interviewing because one, they obviously didn't have insight to know that this person was not going to write them a good letter. And two, it was just she's funny that she did that. Point I'm trying to make is if you need to make sure you're thinking about who you ask for a letter. And you shouldn't be asking someone that you haven't worked with one-on-one directly and that you don't have a good relationship with. Just because of this was another program director who I knew who wrote that letter. The student rotated here. So they probably just wanted a letter from a program director, but they obviously didn't work with that person very well or with much. And so that to me showed that you lacked insight into knowing who to choose to write a good letter. So it's not just having a good letter, it's also you're a letter writer. I've had people get letter from community doctors that have typos, that have the wrong pronouns in them, that have a lot of errors. I'm just like, okay, this person's sloppy. So is their opinion even valid to this about this candidate? So you need to be very mindful and careful who you're choosing your letters from. To say all that, I don't know if I would even consider a letter from a resident. It depends on if it was well written or not. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm sorry.
I just don't know how that would be helpful because again, if this is a resident that's at your program, then they hopefully have the, communication, open door communication to tell you about the person. For example, the one person that I really wanted, I went to my program director and was like, no, I want her, rank her high, please rank her high. And that's how so I don't know why you would need a letter from a resident unless you just didn't work with the attendings enough, in which case, like Dr. Daniel said, then you need to know your letter writers a little bit better and so that you have a genuine letter.
Any advice for how quieter, more reserved applicants can stand out and not seem too cold or standoffish during their interview? I'm going to answer this, and y'all are going to be shocked that I am one of the more quieter, reserved people in my program. Tori, don't do that. You know that. I'm putting my program on blast. For 6 months, they didn't think I could talk. And now I don't shut up.
I need for you to not include me in that, by the way.
Dr. Daniels knew I talked because I talked to her a lot. And I said, I'm sorry, I am here again to express some things. But you can still be engaged. We have some very quiet people in our program, and they did great on interview day. Again, if there's a game or what do they call them? Icebreaker, whatever, give your input, comment on a couple of people, and just be present. Like being present doesn't mean you're talking, right? Like my body language right now says I am engaged with you guys. I'm interested in the questions you're asking. I'm interested in the answers people are giving, right? I'm not just looking around, whatever, twiddling my thumbs. We can tell when you're on your phone. You think you're slick, but you're not slicker than we are. So like just because you don't talk as much doesn't mean that you can't be engaged. Your body language matters. You want to look like a person, don't just be like stiff as a board. And just show who you are. It works fine.
It really does. I'm a quiet person. I got made fun of for 4 years because everyone in my program was like, we're gonna put a bell on you. You don't make any noise. You're not loud. You're not out. And to talk loud is just, it hurts my throat. And so I don't do it. So, but you can still show your personality. And my program director was very much like me. She was very quiet, very reserved, but when things need to be said, they need to be said. When things need to be done, they need to be done. And so I think she picked that up in me because we're very similar in personality in that regard. And so, like HB said, just be yourself and show that you know you can behave appropriately when needed.
This was so great. I'm so happy I got to see all of you guys. I mean, I saw Dr. Daniels today. She was probably sick of seeing me, but I saw her today. But it's always a pleasure to see you, Tori and Amber. To the participants, I hope this was helpful. You guys know how to reach me. I think if you don't, I'm on Instagram. Hold on, I forgot my Insta. Dr. Crenshaw, you're on a different platform. What's your preferred platform? You're muted.
Yeah, I just noticed. I post more like medical content on TikTok, but I do have Instagram, but I don't really post a lot of stuff on my Instagram these days. But I'll put my handle on there. It's the same as Instagram and TikTok.
And then I'm gonna put my programs Insta on there because we are killing the Insta game right now. So you can see, yes, Dr. Daniels.
So I just got back from back to school night with my twins, and the Pennsylvania hospital program doctor Mike lives behind me. Her kids go to the same school as me, as my kids. And we were talking, and she goes, Kel, your residents are killing ACOG week. I was like, what are you talking about? Your Instagram page is blowing up. Like, your residents are amazing. They're really selling your program. And I was like, oh yeah, I had something to do with that. Absolutely. I'm directing it. And she's like, you're right, because I don't do social media. You know that. So my residents are killing the game. Shout out to Pam Matthews and whoever else is doing it. So please check out our Instagram. It is not anything I've ever done because I don't do social media. They are killing the game, and other programs are jealous.
I was definitely gonna plug in ACOG week because I know I know for me as an applicant, I found ACOG week really helpful because these programs spend a lot of time just showing each class individually, showing things that are highlights of their program that you might not find on their website. Like for example, my program, we just had simulations yesterday, and so we had video clips of that, and then we all did fun facts about each of the residents. So you get to see the program from a lens that's not so uptight and formal sometimes, but you still get valuable information. So I would say any program you're interested in, definitely look and see if they're active on social media right now.
And you can, each district is like, each ACOG district is highlighting the programs in their district. So if you are like, I can't find all these people or whatever, just go to the ACOG district Insta and click through those stories. And some of them even have the highlights, etc. So you should be able to find any program you want at this point because the only way we can connect with you is virtually. So I am going to let everyone get back to whatever fun night they have in store. I'm gonna go read about clotting disorders in pregnancy. And you guys have the most amazing night and best of luck to each of you in the match season. You can do this. It may be a little harder for some, but do not give up if this is where you want to be. Thanks for joining us, guys. Have a good night.